100 feet above the runway. The engines remained at idle. The captain called for a go-around, but the aircraft did not respond. In the cockpit, no alarms, no warnings, just silence where power should have been. Why did a perfectly functional jet fall from the sky, with both pilots following the checklist? It was early morning, August 3rd, 2016. Flight EK521, a Boeing 777, was nearing the end of its journey from Trivandrum to Dubai. The aircraft, registered as Alpha 6 Echo Mike Whiskey, had been in service for 13 years. It was powered by two Rolls-Royce Trent 892 engines known for their strength and reliability. On board were 282 passengers, 18 crew members, among them the captain, 34 years old, an experienced pilot with over 7,000 hours of flight time. The first officer, an Australian, 37, equally skilled. For most of the flight, the skies had been calm. At cruising altitude, 33,000 feet, the aircraft had performed flawlessly. Passengers relaxed. The cabin was quiet. Outside, the sun rose over the Arabian Sea. As the plane began its descent, the weather reports from Dubai began to change. The temperature on the ground had reached nearly 50 degrees Celsius. The air above the runway shimmered with heat. Then came a warning: wind shear, a phenomenon every pilot dreads, sudden, invisible, capable of shifting wind direction and speed in an instant. It is most dangerous during takeoff and landing, when an aircraft flies closest to the ground, with little margin for error. The crew acknowledged the report. They prepared for the approach, adjusting speed, configuring the aircraft. The plan was to land on runway 12 left. At first, the descent was smooth, but as the plane entered the final approach path, conditions became unstable. Wind direction shifted, airspeed fluctuated. At 1,100 feet, the captain disconnected the autopilot. He chose to hand-fly the remainder of the approach, a standard practice in challenging conditions. Yet the winds continued to change. The aircraft became slightly high on the glide path. The captain adjusted. Thrust levers moved to idle. Flaps extended to full. Seconds passed. The runway came into view. But what the crew could not yet see was that the wind was about to shift again, this time with greater force. The Boeing 777 descended toward the runway. Ground proximity alerts remained silent. To the crew, all appeared manageable. At 50 feet, then 30, the main landing gear touched down. A bounce, slight, unexpected. In that moment, with the aircraft still fast and unstable, the captain made a decision. Go around. He called for it, pressed the takeoff go-around switch. What followed was not what he expected. The engines remained at idle. The aircraft was now in a critical state. And as the Boeing lifted from the runway, barely climbing, it entered the most dangerous phase of the entire flight. The Boeing began to rise, slowly, unsteadily. It was not climbing as it should. The engines, still at idle, provided no thrust to carry the heavy aircraft skyward. The landing gear, now retracting, left the plane in a vulnerable state. Flaps were being adjusted. Procedures were followed. But something was wrong. Inside the cockpit, seconds passed. The pilots worked through the go-around, but the lack of power was not yet fully understood. Outside, the air was unforgiving. The tailwind that had pushed them down the runway now sapped the plane's fragile lift. Altitude, 85 feet, airspeed falling. And then, the descent began. There was no time for words. The aircraft dropped toward the runway. The crew's focus sharpened. Hands moved instinctively, but momentum could not be reversed. Impact. A sickening sound. Metal on concrete. The belly of the jet scraped along the surface. Sparks erupted beneath the fuselage, a trail of fire igniting in their wake. Inside the cabin, chaos. The calm of the final approach was gone. The jolt of impact threw passengers forward. Overhead compartments burst open. Loose items became hazards. A moment later, the right engine failed catastrophically. Shrapnel tore through the wing root. The left engine caught fire, flames spreading rapidly. The plane skidded down the runway, veering to one side, momentum finally slowing, then stopping near the perimeter of the field. Silence for a breath. Then, alarms. Smoke, heat. The captain's voice broke through the radio, calm, professional. Evacuation required. A fire on board. Inside, the cabin filled with smoke. Dark, acrid, choking. The flight attendants acted without hesitation. Doors opened, escape slides deployed. Commands rang out over the rising panic. Go. Leave everything. Move. Passengers stumbled to the exits. Some disoriented, some frozen in fear. Thick smoke clouded their path. The heat of the fire pressed against the skin, suffocating, unbearable. Outside, the sun blazed above, but the greater threat remained behind them. As the last of the passengers escaped, a secondary explosion rocked the aircraft. The left wing fuel tank, engulfed in flame, detonated. A young firefighter, responding bravely, was caught in the blast, his life lost in service to others. And yet, against all odds, every passenger survived. The crew, their training tested to the limits, had saved them. On the scorched tarmac, barefoot survivors watched as their plane was consumed. The reality of what had just occurred, settling in slowly, painfully. For the pilots, for the investigators soon to arrive, the questions would only grow. What had caused this? Why had the engines remained at idle? How could a modern jet, flown by experienced hands, fall into such peril? The answers still lay ahead. In the days that followed, the wreckage of Flight EK521 remained under guard. Twisted metal, burned wiring, the blackened remains of an aircraft that had, only hours before, been a symbol of precision and strength. Investigators arrived quickly. Teams from the General Civil Aviation Authority, from Emirates, from Boeing, from Rolls-Royce. The voice and data recorders, the so-called black boxes, were recovered and sent for analysis. In quiet rooms, away from the noise of the airport, the tapes were studied, frame by frame, word by word. Every action of the crew, every system response, and nothing would be left unexplored. What they found was sobering. The approach had been unstable, affected by shifting winds and high temperatures. The decision to go around had been made only after the aircraft had already contacted the runway. Technically, the plane was on the ground when the takeoff go-around switch was pressed, and this was the key. In that specific configuration, with the thrust levers at idle and the landing gear in transition, the auto throttle system did not respond to the go-around command. No fault, no malfunction. Simply logic as designed. The engines remained at idle. Even as the pilots worked to climb away, it was a gap, a subtle one, in the training and understanding of how the system behaved in this rare but critical scenario. The crew had done many things right. Their response to the evacuation was exemplary. Their professionalism, under extreme pressure, had saved lives. But in those final seconds before the impact, they had not realized that thrust was missing. And by the time they did, it was too late. The official report would later confirm these findings. Human factors, system logic, environmental challenges, no single cause. A chain of events. In the aftermath, changes were made, training procedures updated, simulator scenarios revised, greater emphasis placed on understanding the nuances of automated systems. Because in aviation, it is often not the obvious errors, but the small gaps, the quiet misunderstandings that lead to tragedy. And so we remember Flight EK521, not only for the accident, not only for the loss of one brave firefighter, but for the lessons, hard-earned, that now ripple through the industry. Every flight, every approach, carries with it the weight of these lessons. The sky remains beautiful. but unforgiving, and those who fly must remain vigilant, always.